Welcome, everyone. This is episode 29 of the Brandon Adams podcast. I have with me Doug Polk. So, Doug, why don't you give some background on the challenge, how it came to be, and then how it became such a big event? Because I think this is one of the most watched pieces of poker content in poker history.
Yeah. So first off, thanks for having me on. It's good to finally talk again. It's been a little bit since we last chatted. Actually, you joined me for a podcast. I want to say around a year ago or so. But it's good to talk to you, and hopefully we can have some good conversations today. But yeah, the challenge is interesting. It's one of the very few times in history in poker where two people talked a bunch of shit. A challenge was issued, it was accepted, and then it actually was played. I can't. So few of these have actually happened. I mean, obviously Phil Galfond, as you know, has his own selection of challenges lined up too. But it was cool getting to see the community sort of rally around this spectacle of two guys just duking it out in the online felt, and I'm definitely happy that I managed to walk away with the win.
Give us the exact history of how the challenge started. When you say guys were trash talking, a challenge was issued, how did it go down?
All right, so there's a lot of different things that happen. I'm gonna do my best here to hit on the most important points. But if you're not familiar, myself and Daniel have a long history of sort of feuding about various subjects. There was a conversation about whether he could beat 20-50 online back in 2014, where he thought he could do it with 2 weeks of study, and I thought that was ridiculous. And then, of course, there was a podcast he did where, he talked about how more rate could be good for players that I thought was also kind of ridiculous. So we've had a back and forth for some time, and then in August of last year, Nick Schulman tweeted, and it was a picture of me, and said something about, remember when this animal, came in with his shirt, blasted it off, and then we didn't hear from him again, or something like that. And then Negreanu responded with a picture of some guy getting knocked out, and it said, "I spanked him like a petulant child." That of course got a response going from me. Went back and forth for a bit, and ultimately I challenged him to a heads-up match. Mainly just bluffing. I didn't think he would accept, because I just assumed that he would know that he would be a huge underdog in that format. But he actually did accept. And then from there, we kind of hashed it out publicly. It was actually a very weird negotiation process. Usually when you agree to a challenge, both people will talk to each other one-on-one, and they'll come to some agreements, and then they'll announce them. This was, he would tweet, "Hey, Doug, I'm thinking we do this." And then I'd have to say, "Hey, Daniel, yeah or no." And so it was all public, which is very rare for, I think, something like this to happen. But we sort of tweeted back and forth, got all of the logistics squared away. We got a judge who actually was Phil Galfond for this challenge, just in case we need an arbitrator to come in and say, the solution to some problems that we might have. And we agreed on 25,000 hands at 200, 400, no limit hold'em. So for those of you guys who don't know, that's a $40,000 buy-in. And it's pretty high stakes. One of the higher stakes games that we would see online today. I don't think that many sites have games that are running that high. So nosebleed, heads up, no limit, where very clearly a player could lose 7 figures or win 7 figures, which was a good sized game for sure.
I spanked him like a petulant child. Was he referring to something that happened in real life, like he beat you in the big live pod, or did that refer to anything?
Yeah, there was a tournament that we played in, I want to say 2018, where we actually table drew for a $300,000 buy-in, and we got the same table seated next to each other. So it was, people wanted to know if it was rigged, because it was a little too juicy to be true that we drew seats next to each other. And basically, I showed up, and I had a hoodie on, and I busted out my hoodie, and it said "More rake is better" on a billboard to signify the billboard that I had bought across the street from the Rio that said "More rake is better" on it. So it was a whole bit.
Oh, wow. This does have a long history.
It does. You know about the billboard?
I vaguely remember it now that you mention, but wow, this is a long history.
Yeah, I bought the billboard across the street from the Rio so people would see "More rake is better" on their way to the tournaments every day. Which honestly, just the laughs that were had from that was totally worth the cost of the billboard. But anyway, so in that tournament, we played a few bigger pots, and he beat me in all of them, including just having stronger hands than me. And then one, pretty late call where I was bluffing. And so he was referencing how he did in that tournament versus me. And I was kind of posturing back saying, okay, if you think you can spank me like a petulant child, let's go one-on-one, I'm more than happy to play you in the heads up arena. So that's kind of the backstory on that.
When you first started negotiating, like there was no talk of odds, number of hands, all that sort of stuff. That stuff you guys worked out as you went along in this Twitter negotiation? There
wasn't a talk about odds. The odds developed in a secondary market. There was no side bet, and I think, frankly, I know it's juicy to have side bets and challenges, and we ended up having them in this one anyway because I felt that the odds weren't reflective of what they should have been. So I wasn't planning on betting on the side, but then when I was only a 4-1 favorite, I thought that I was very profitable at that line. So I ended up betting a bunch on the side anyway. But one of the problems with side bets in something like this is the side bets can have a really huge effect on the way that you have to play in the actual game itself. Because let's just say, for example, the buy-ins are 40,000. Let's just say in hypothetical land, I have $1 million on myself to win 250. Well, then I lose $1 million if I lose. So you get these situations where, let's say you're up 300,000. If you lose this, you lose $1 million. So it's not 1-to-1 chip value anymore. Every dollar you make doesn't equal $1. Every dollar you lose doesn't lose $1. It's dollars that you lose are worth, could be $2 or $3, whereas dollars that you gain are worth less. So you get in these weird sort of ICM spots. And I think about, as someone that's played a lot of tournaments, I'm sure you understand this. You end up in these situations where it's not about winning the chips anymore. It's about trying to maximize your value of your tournament result. And that makes situations very weird and complicated because you can't just maybe call with the right hand in a cash game that you would normally call with, because you have to think about how does this change my chance to win this whole thing? So originally I kind of wanted to avoid that and really sort of make it about the hands themselves being played. But I mean, it ended up in that direction anyway. So maybe we should have had one out of the gates.
Yeah, we'll get later to a spot that happened mid-match where you had a rough session and you went from being solidly in the lead to being pretty comfortably in the lead, but having to concern yourself with possibly losing. And it maybe changed your play from that point forward. I want to get there later because I want to go over some biography first. You basically rose up the heads up ranks and had very strong success very early with what I gathered was few setbacks. And then you shifted to the content space and basically became the number one purveyor of poker content, and then kind of got burned out in that space and have been kind of a lot of pots on the stove since then. And this challenge marked a refocus on poker. I want you to just give us a quick summary of your rise up the poker ranks, maybe go into your first big heads up match, which was with Sauce, and then how you determined that you wanted to get into the content space and what that experience was like for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So just a little bit of poker background. I started playing when I was 18, wink, wink, when I was in high school. And I started playing online at PokerStars. I deposited $10-20 a bunch of times. We all know the stories of people trying to run up a bankroll. And then finally some stuff clicked and I started to win. My background was mainly full ring out of the gate, 9-handed poker cash games was where I started.
Now, were you a serious gamer before this? Like, was that your background?
Yeah, so we want to go even farther, but so I thought 18 years old was far enough back, but apparently we got to go way back in time here. And when I was a kid growing up, I was always into games. I was into chess. I was into StarCraft. I was into Warcraft 3. It's another strategy game. All of the nerdy games where you're playing versus one opponent and trying to outwit them. That was always my cup of tea. And when I first found poker, I was amazed that you could play a game versus people for money, because I think most of us growing up, our families teach us gambling is bad. The house is going to beat you. You don't want to lose your money. And so I think you get this perspective of gambling, which isn't, hey, if I'm making plus EV bets, I'm winning. You get this perspective of stay away from gambling, which I think is fair. That's good parenting to teach your kid from a young age to not want to gamble on things. But the reality is, if you can make plus EV bets, you should be doing so. And if you're playing versus people, you can win. So that's sort of the way that I found poker, was through these video games, people talking about it and talking about poker. And that's kind of what launched me into wanting to play online. Going back to talking about running it up. So basically, I started obviously online small stakes games, kind of worked my way up. And then ultimately, somewhere around 2008, 2009, I found my real passion, which was Heads Up No Limit. I'm not sure why, but when I play Heads Up No Limit, it's always gone really well for me. And I think I just have a really good ability to try and have a sound, balanced ranges, and to take the time away from the table to really focus on bringing a balanced strategy that is hard to counter and hard to beat to the game. And I've always had a lot of success with implementing that. When I got into Heads Up, I immediately started having success there. And before I knew it, I was playing in some pretty high stakes games. In fact, there was a guy named X-Blink back in the day that maybe some of the people that remember some poker games from way back in the day, maybe they'll remember. But I played some against him. I played some against the A.E. Joneses of the world. All of the high stakes Heads Up guys back in the day I started to battle and duke it out with. And that's kind of where, my Heads Up roots started to grow from. Over the course of the next 5-6 years, I had downswing, had an upswing. I was, kind of all over the place. But the moral of the story was I kind of reached the pinnacle of the Heads Up streets. I had a well-publicized challenge with Ben Solsky, where I think most people at the time thought that it was the consensus best couple of Heads Up guys playing each other. This is actually probably even still my most proud moment, was beating him in that challenge. I think it really cemented me as the top guy in the Heads Up streets, and that kind of was the peak of I guess my dominance in that arena. After that, I started to look for some new challenges. I started to play some live tournaments. That went well. I've won 3 World Series of Poker bracelets. I also did well in a lot of the high roller scene. I think if you look at my resume there, I've had a good degree of success playing in those as well. But ultimately, I just found that I kind of didn't enjoy it in the same way that I liked Heads Up, and I found myself kind of wanting to do something different. Sometimes in life, you want to branch out, even just because even though you might be good at something, it doesn't mean I want to do it for the rest of my life. And that's when I had the idea to launch Upswing Poker. I joined together with a couple of my good friends, Ryan Fee, Matt Coletta, and we launched a training site that could teach people poker in a different way, more of a course style format. At that point, it became clear someone's going to have to promote this. Okay, I looked at them; it obviously wasn't going to be either of them. I mean, Fees is great, but he wasn't going to be making YouTube videos. So, I fired up the camera, put together a team, and the rest is kind of history. We grew to being the #1 most viewed poker YouTube channel, and that was the background.
Your videos were always tremendously well edited. They were funny. They were geared towards the modern short attention span. You found, tell me if I'm getting the name right, but Seriously Serious, who used to produce popular 2+2 videos back in the Full Tilt days, and always like very popular guy in poker and very funny guy. So you somehow, I guess, decided that he would be the person, and you connected with him. Is that right?
Yeah, I found him very early on. When I started making videos, I wanted to bring in people that were really talented that I thought would do a good job. And I just think about all the times that I would watch his music videos where he would parody. He'd take a famous song and he would make a poker parody version of it and post it on 2+2. And frankly, those videos are still to this day amazing. And I wanted him to work with me because I thought he would do a phenomenal job. I've actually never posted a YouTube video he didn't edit. He's been my editor the entire way through, and he's done a phenomenal job. And there's no way I would have had the success I had on YouTube without him. And
would he tell you what to do, or would you tell him what you wanted? Like, would he give you direction? I think viewers would like it if you did things this way.
Well, we had a creative process, and we had a group of people. It was me, Thomas was the editor, Jamie Cursiter helped do a lot of the writing and help write the jokes, and then Mike Brady was he helped a bit on some of the ideas and also more of the social media side of things. And we would kind of all put our heads together and come up with ideas and jokes and concepts and what we thought would be good. I don't think that there was really a lot of specific direction in that way. I think that I had a lot of flexibility and freedom to basically record the segments I thought were good, and then I would just send it off to Thomas. So we'd have brainstorming, we'd have ideas, people would pitch jokes, I would record, I would do a lot of them. If I came up with stuff on the spot, I'd roll with that. I'd send it to Thomas, and then he would cut the stuff that he thought really didn't fit, and then he would edit together all the things that did and sort of add in some editing jokes of his own to kind of bring it to life. And I think it was a real team effort. And one of the reasons why we managed to have such high quality content that had so much density to it in terms of what was being brought up was that we had so many different people kind of pitching in together to make it great.
And did you bring your analytical mindset to content and look at what viewers responded to and things like that?
Yeah, it's cool when you look at analytics on YouTube, you can see when people click off, right? You can see how long they watch, how old they are, what countries they're from, what bits they like, which bits did they rewatch, when did they leave. So for example, we found things like, I always like to, at the start to open with full screen me to talk about the video, what it's going to be. And what I found was that didn't do well. It was just too much Doug. We needed less Doug. That was way too much in my face. So, if I was analyzing a hand, I'd start off with me in the corner with the cards getting dealt. Okay, people could do that, not too much Doug anymore. So they could maybe listen to me, see me, but then watch the action. And that increased retention. And of course, retention is one of the most important metrics that YouTube uses to decide how many people they show your video to. So there's this game of looking at the data and then taking that and then trying to be creative with your solutions in terms of how to increase your retention, increase your viewership, and increase sort of the ability of your content to reach people that you sort of have to work on. And I think that's actually very interesting and unique to the platform of YouTube, because on one hand, you want to be creative and funny and have jokes and do all these things and create content people enjoy, but you also need to create stuff that, as you said, is geared for people that maybe don't have the longest attention spans. You're not going to get people to sit there and just listen to really boring stuff. They're going to leave, and if they leave, YouTube won't show it to people. So you're sort of always caught between the wanting to do the content that you most enjoy or you most want to put forward and what actually performs the best. And I think that that striving for the middle ground where those things intersect was what our goal was, in terms of our philosophy as a channel.
And obviously during that time, you're sort of getting paid in two ways. You're getting paid a small amount from YouTube, and then you're getting paid in the form of subscribers for Upswing. You would sometimes post your YouTube metrics and like how much you had been paid or whatever, and how many cumulative views. What summary stats can you share there? Like, do you have a number for your cumulative YouTube views or your highest paid year from YouTube?
When I look at YouTube, right, it costs me more money to hire the people to make the videos than what my total YouTube revenue was. I mean, my YouTube revenue was good, but I mean, I think I made, if I had to guess, it would be something like 250,000 over the course of the career of the channel was our total revenue. I think you get paid something around $2 or $2.50 per 1,000 views, and I think we did 100 million views or so, roughly. I'm kind of estimating on some of this stuff. I haven't checked the specifics lately.
But that's got to feel good, 100 million views.
Yeah, it's sick. Think about that. That's so many people, 100 million. And I think the average person has seen about 2.5 videos. So, that's 30 million-ish people have watched one of my videos on YouTube, which is crazy. And what's especially funny is it's all in a pretty specific demo of 25 to 45-year-old men. So if I see a guy and he's a young to middle-aged guy, and he looks at me and I get a bit of a strange look, I'm like, okay, this guy probably recognized me from these videos. But if you're younger than that or older than that or a woman, I know there's 0% chance that you know me. It just, the statistics don't lie. You can see the analytics. My audience has 2% women. It's not many women have clicked on to look at a Pocket Jack's hand in their day, I don't think. So it's funny sort of seeing that data play out. It's cool having had that many people see your work and watch your videos. And when you talk about the revenue side, by far and away, the value was in building my brand and in promoting Upswing Poker as, the premier training site on the internet for poker. That way more money was made on that end. And it's hard to quantify, right? You can look at the direct link traffic you drive, but it's so small compared to what the total amount of sales and revenue and users that join what that number is, that you have to do a lot of guesswork. by far and away the majority of the money was made through the business side. And I think that that's actually an important thing to think about for anyone considering getting into YouTube or getting into podcasting or whatever you're trying to be getting into from a content perspective. You're going to have to think about monetization, because platforms themselves are not going to really pay you a lot of money to produce the content, because there's so many people looking to produce content. You're going to get paid by starting businesses and then using your reach to capitalize in those areas by creating a product that can create a lot of value for people. That's where the money can really be made.
And the way these sites work is that the big get bigger, right? Because your name shows up first when people search very general things like poker, what have you. So it was a little mysterious that, having dominated those streets, you decided to quit the videos. What was happening there?
Well, for me, it's not always been about just making the most money. If I want to make the most money, it would be very clear cut. Stay in poker, play poker a lot, promote poker, wear upswing everywhere I go, make videos. But sometimes you just get bored, I mean, you strike me as someone that's done a lot of different things in his day and likes to have different hobbies and different things that you get passionate about. And so sometimes you burn out. You're not interested in it anymore. You want to try something new. And I found myself kind of in that spot several times, especially when it comes to poker. Poker has been great. It's given me everything that I have. Every dollar I have today, even if it was invested, it started in poker, right? So I'm so thankful that I found this game. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to love playing it for the rest of my life. Sometimes you just get burned out of things, or you don't enjoy them anymore, and you want to take on new challenges.
Upswing Poker, it's still going strong. It has an amazing reputation as a teaching site. Tell me which content you're most proud of at Upswing Poker.
I think that at this point, what I'm most proud of is the lab. It's our membership. Realistically, poker training for many, many, many years was done the exact same fashion, which was you sign up and you just get this plethora of random videos all over the place by tons of people. And so you kind of have to wade through. I think back to my card runners experience. Anyone that's been in poker for a long time remembers card runners. There were some great videos that you could watch, but it wasn't a cohesive plan. It was, I signed up and then I just got a random video, and I would get random videos every day. I think taking that model and changing it to be in a course format where you start at the beginning and you work your way to the end, I think that was actually revolutionary for the training industry. And I look at a lot of the people that have come after us, they've taken that method of learning, because I think it's just better for the person that's, the experience of learning, right? Start at the beginning, small team of guys. It's a course that you understand and can implement. It's not just, here's a session some guy played today and then learn about a spot. You actually get to learn from the ground up, and I think that's an important facet to learning. I'm also very proud of my heads-up course, although it is a bit dated now, because what was available in terms of tools at the time obviously can't rival what there is today. I put together a course that really explained my thinking across the board in all kinds of different heads-up spots, and it was, sort of the sum of all of the stuff I had learned over the years in the way that I applied strategy in heads up at a really high level. So I'm proud of that, even if now I think a lot of that information is a bit dated. But yeah, I think the lab is the shining crown jewel of Upswing Poker. We continue to bolster it and make it stronger every day, and by making sure we have a qualified team of coaches. I think that the lab would be what I'm most proud of.
Now, Ryan Fee is more of a PLO guy, and you're more of a no limit guy. Do you specialize in no limit at Upswing, or is it equally weighted?
Ryan Fee's more of a seat of his pants kind of guy. He's all over the place. He's played tournaments here and there, even though he does not enjoy that format. He's played a bunch of no limit cash. He's played a lot of PLO. I wouldn't really describe him as anything too specific when it comes to playing. And he doesn't do our PLO content at Upswing. He's really only done no limit content. So he's not our PLO coach in any capacity. A lot of the training nowadays is done by some of the newer guys that we have. I think in PLO, Chris Weiner and Dylan Wiseman do a lot of our content there. Alex Miller made a recent advanced tournament course that there's quite good people can learn from. Jacob Dahl did a mixed game course. I could go on and on. We've had so many great players make different courses at Upswing, but I think that in terms of actually creating the material, I don't really think that Fees is the guy to make a lot of up-to-date solver approved material because he's not playing in those games anymore. And I think that a really important part of coaching is to have people that can actually teach the material and they actually know the material. They're actually good players. So at this point, no, we're not. He, at least for fees, he's not too dedicated to that anymore. I am putting together some sessions that I played versus Negreanu. I have all my footage recorded, so I can go through and teach people and talk about some of the spots that I played from the challenge, and I'm going to be adding that into the lab. So I think people will be looking forward to that for sure.
Well, let's get in the weeds a bit there, and then I want to go towards your current upswing, shall we say? You've gotten everything right. Before the challenge, during the challenge, after the challenge. You said the last 6 to 9 months has been sort of a career time for you. But digging into the challenge, okay, so Daniel takes this on. Daniel is a hyper competitive person. It has served, that hyper competitiveness has served him very well over time. He's not afraid to take on challenges such as this. So at a certain point, you're working out terms on Twitter. It becomes clear that the match is going to happen. You started studying in anticipation of the match, maybe a couple of months before the terms had been settled. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
And you had not played much in the previous 2 years. Is that correct?
Yeah. In fact, I think actually one of the last time I played was against you.
Oh, man. We might have to revisit that in 1,000-hand sample so you can beat me up.
Yeah.
The 10-hand sample I can deal with.
Yeah.
So you hadn't played in a couple years, and you have this vast experience base where you had once gotten to the top of the No Limit pyramid. So you know that you're going to have to take a modern approach, chat with guys that are dealing with solvers all day, every day. One of the issues with solvers is that when a poker player is learning new lines, they're forced to throw away their previous experience base, and there's some cost to throwing away the previous experience base. When you undertook the new study, did you decide like, okay, I am a blank slate, or did you want to sort of balance your new study with your old experience base?
I think that it would have been too difficult to try and mix those two things together, because then you're constantly asking questions. Is this better than what I was doing before? What am I going to keep? What am I going to leave? And there was some spots that I debated it. For example, one spot that I used to do a lot of back in the day was if there was a flush out there, let's say there's 3 diamonds. When I would have the ace of diamonds, I would bluff very aggressively with that card some of the time. And then I would do it when I had flushes as well as bluff with that card, because I know that they can't have the nut flush. That concept happens in PLO a lot more than No Limit. And the reason it doesn't happen in No Limit is because that card's actually not a good bluff card, because you want them to have floated the prior streets with that card, right? Let's say that the turn the flush gets in and you have the ace of diamonds and your opponent bets, you're going to for sure at least call. So when you have it as the guy betting and they call, well, now you block the folds on the river. So the solvers actually don't like having cards like that for a lot of the bluffs when you're representing flushes. They prefer to have middling flush cards that block the flushes that might trap. So, for example, I think about that concept, and I was talking about that with my coach. His name is FrabXD. I also work with Clicker. These are guys that, unless you're really up to date in the modern online streets, you won't know who they are. But, Frab said to me, that bluff candidate is worse than the better ones, but it's not a lot worse. And so if you find that metric for you is something you could implement in the game consistently, then I think it's fine to use. But I kind of stayed away from that because I really wanted to just try and lean towards using the right candidates whenever I could and try to gain a small amount of EV in those situations and learn as I went along to be more balanced and to use the right hands, because you do sacrifice a small amount of EV by bluffing with the incorrect candidates. But what's most important is making sure that you're bluffing enough. and making sure that you're calling enough and making sure you're betting enough. Because the biggest mistake you can make is to be under bluffing in a lot of these scenarios. In that scenario, you don't get to win with your bluffs. And additionally, your opponent can exploit you if they don't bluff you enough. Or rather if they do a lot of folding. So the point is, it's more important in poker to be balanced with frequency than it is to pick the exact right combo. But if you want to play at a truly world-class level, you're going to have to do a healthy amount of both.
Frab XD, give us a little bit of background on him. How did you find him? How did he get to the top of this game? What is his day-to-day like?
Right. So when I started this challenge, I started asking everyone I knew, hey, who's good right now? Who could I work with? Just kind of put my tentacles out there and see what I got back. And I met Frab through one of those channels. He showed me some of his results he's had in his career. We talked a bunch of spots, and I could just tell immediately this guy was the real deal. There's just this sharpness to some of the top online guys that when you talk poker with them that you just don't get when you talk to even good players.
How old is he?
He's 25 years old. So he's pretty old for online standards. I was resident old man.
Where's he from?
He's from Sweden.
And he's been playing, I guess, for 10 years or so?
I would assume less than that. I'm not sure when he started, but yeah, 5, 7, 8, something like that, I'm sure. He's a little bit more of the coach. The guy who's always studying, learning, always preparing notes, always preparing, analyzing samples and really trying to take your game to the next level versus, actually playing the super high stakes. Clicker was the other guy I worked a lot with. He was more of the player that plays high stakes. I mean, this guy's played basically everyone in Heads Up No Limit lately. In my opinion, he's the best heads up player in the world right now. He's only 19 years old. Or did he turn 20? I forget. He's 19 or 20. Either way, he's not even allowed to go gamble in Vegas. And so the team I was working with were younger guys, Scandi guys, and it is funny to be working with the Scandis. I spent most of my career battling them, but super sharp guys, and I couldn't honestly find better coaches.
So what's his day-to-day like? How did he rise to the top of poker knowledge? And is he strictly a Heads Up No Limit?
Yeah, he's strictly Heads Up No Limit. I think he's just one of those guys that is very detail and process oriented, where he really tries to make sure he understands the specifics, and constantly checks and learns and runs sims to be better and better at it. I'm not sure what his day-to-day is like. I think he prefers more of a coaching role than a playing role. I think is my take on just him overall. But he's also played a lot of heads up in the mid to high stakes arena, and he's won an amazing clip. So I'm not sure what it was like for him coming up. I can say during the challenge, this guy was just meticulous with the amount of notes that I received in ways that I fucked up hands. So that was definitely interesting to read. Every day I'd wake up and there'd be a fresh batch of things that I messed up the day before to go through, which is always good to try and improve your game and understand spots better. But yeah, I mean, I don't know day to day. I mean, he's also in Europe, right? So the time zones are kind of weird. Obviously, when I wake up, he's been up for 7-8 hours or whatever. So yeah.
So in your match with Daniel, you were not allowed any sort of technical assistance during play, but you were allowed to have a team of coaches that you consulted with over the course of the challenge.
So these were the rules. We were allowed to use software to help us manage the tables and all the options on it. So I could have something that set a randomized number. I could have a timer on it. I could have a button that percentage pot. I could have anything from the software to manage the tables. We were also allowed to have coaches. That was totally fine. We were also allowed to have people manually track stats. That was allowed. And then we were also allowed to have notes and ranges up for what we wanted to do in the game. So the line was specifically nothing could in real time tell you what to do. That was the line. And I think for most online poker players, you kind of understand that's the line, right? If you're playing and something says fold now because of the hand situation, then you're cheating. That's just, I think, pretty clear cut.
Okay, so there was some amount of software allowed, but it was quite limited.
No software that makes decisions for you, right? Or tries to use information that has happened in a hand to make a decision for you.
And that's called in poker terminology real-time assistance, and
right.
Sites have basically tried to eliminate that by seizing accounts if they think that real-time assistants are being used?
Yeah, sites do their best to monitor and prevent it. Different sites to varying degrees. And just a piece of advice from me, if you're playing online poker, make sure you're playing on a site that takes the stuff seriously, because if they don't, you could be playing a bot. And guess what? You're not going to beat a bot. Bots are better than humans nowadays. This isn't something where, oh yeah, well, I'll beat it. No, you're not. You're going to lose to the bot. So it's important the sites take this seriously and try to prevent it. Long term, a really important part of the health of poker is going to be, can sites, battle against people using either bots or real-time assistants to protect the player pool. So take this seriously, because it's not something you're going to be able to overcome.
Which sites that people might be playing on are good?
Well, it's tough.
I know that there's not an active legal environment for poker, unfortunately, but I don't know. Just popular ones are like America's Card Room or things like that. I don't know what's thought to be good or bad in terms of bot detection.
I think the best, and take this with a grain of salt, because I've only really played the U.S. sites. I'm based out of Vegas, so I've not been playing on any of these European sites that I'm going to be talking about. But the best, to my understanding, I think PokerStars has the strongest anti-bot stance. They most actively monitor and make people prove that they are not bots and trying to protect the players. So I think PokerStars is probably the best one. But there are a lot of other sites that are making moves. ACR in the past has had a lot of bots, but they've been trying to improve that lately. They hired Nanonoko, Randy Liu to try and find these bots and basically protect those games. So they definitely care. I know that Phil cares. Phil Nagy, the CEO, cares. I think WSOP.com, I'm not sure if they do a good job detecting bots or if it's just such low stakes on that site that no one seems to fucking care, but definitely doesn't seem to be many bots on WSOP.com. Maybe a couple guys that it's possible or questionable. I think Party Poker tends to have a few bots, to my understanding. They're quite as aggressive with that, but I would just be doing a lot of guessing, and I don't want to throw sites under the bus just because, I heard from some guy that they have bots. It's not firsthand experience from me, and I don't think that would be fair to those guys.
Now, in terms of the match, you won a lot of money. You won at a healthy clip of somewhere between 9 and 10 big blinds per 100 hands. The way that poker players think about win rates is in terms of this per 100 hands metric. It sounds like you won most of the money by winning a high percentage of pots entered, by winning the non-showdown pots. Maybe you could summarize big picture why you think you won. In
poker, there's only two ways to win. I know it seems like it's a very complicated game and so much is going on, and it is a complicated game, but at the end of the day, there's only two ways to win. Either somebody folds and the other guy wins, so that's called non-showdown, doesn't get to showdown winnings, or at the end of the hand, you both see what each other had and the best hand gets the money. There's no other way to win in poker. It's just those two. So you have showdown winnings and you have non-showdown winnings. It's important to try and win in both. If you play correct balanced poker and heads up, you're pretty likely to win in both if you're a lot better than your opponent. But people can play different styles where you're much more likely to win in one. And let me give some extreme examples. Let's say I play a guy and his strategy is he shoves every hand. That guy is always going to win when someone folds because it's never him. So if there's a fold, it's you. So that guy will every time beat you in non-showdown winnings. However, when you call, and you'll get to call a lot because he's shoving every hand, you're going to have a really strong hand that's much better than him, and you're more likely to win. So even though he's beating you in non-showdown winnings, you're beating him in showdown winnings at such a clip that you're going to win the match. So typically speaking, when you play an optimal style, or you strive to play an optimal style, you're going to win more in the part that your opponent is weaker at, right? If your opponent tries to play strong hands, you'll beat them in non-showdown. If your opponent tries to play too loose, you'll beat them when hands get shown down at the end. So really the balance of playing at a really top level is to be winning enough in both of those manners. I think versus Negreanu, early on in the match, in the middle of the match, he was looking for just hands that were a bit too strong overall to go the distance with. Even when he would bluff, I think he was looking for too specific of bluff candidates instead of trying to just, sometimes maybe you pick the hand that doesn't seem perfect but needs to bluff. He was picking hands that were a bit too strong. And so overall, when I look at his one hand percentage, I think it ended up being somewhere around 47, 48. I kind of have to estimate because we don't have hand histories yet. We just have the data that we tracked manually. So I think he probably was winning something like 47, 48% of hands. And what that means is that when somebody folded, a lot of times it was him. The problem with that when you play versus aggressive players is you're going to end up not winning enough pots. And while that's great when you have good hands, and we saw plenty of hands this challenge where Negreanu hit a big hand and trapped me and I bluffed and got stacked. That happened a bunch. You can look back, a lot of the biggest spots this challenge were that happening. That looks great when that happens, but the problem is it's very hard to make big hands in poker. We all know this. Anyone that plays poker knows. Most of the time you have somewhere between nothing and maybe some kind of middling pair. That's kind of where a lot of the money is won in poker is what do you do when you have all of these bad hands? So he just wasn't winning enough of those pots, I think, to have a chance to win this match, or rather to have a good chance to win this match. And I think once we finally do get these hand histories, we're going to see that the graphs will reflect that. And I think eventually we're going to get them. I think WSOP is in the process of trying to prepare this request. They've said that we can do it. I'm hoping we can do it. I would love to be able to show these stats, and I will definitely post them publicly if I do end up getting this information.
Since he's winning it basically too much in showdown, and we can infer not enough in non-showdown, he's under bluffing in your terminology, or is it fair to say that he's under bluffing? And you had said earlier that under bluffing is a bad mistake to be making heads up. Give us the rationale why under bluffing is such a bad thing in a heads up match. Under bluffing relative to game theoretic optimal.
For sure. So if you're losing a non-showdown, it means one of two things: either you're not bluffing enough or you're not calling enough. It's one or the other. In my opinion, I think Daniel was most likely not bluffing enough, and his calling was probably okay. Maybe there's a few spots he didn't call quite enough as well, but I think it probably more stemmed from not bluffing enough. And that has a pretty bad effect in your game in a lot of ways. I think the first thing is if you're not bluffing enough, then when you check, you have all these weak hands you're not supposed to have, right? So let's say you have two guys and they both have nothing, and one guy checks giving up his nothing, the other guy bluffs, this guy just folds and loses. So it not only affects when you have bad hands, your ability to win pots. That's a really important part of heads up. It also affects when you check your opponent's ability to bluff. Now he gets to bluff more aggressively, more successfully, because you just have too many weak hands that simply have to fold. So it has this compounding effect. You're weaker when you check, and then when you bet, you're too strong, or you're not betting quite often. So your opponent could exploit you by folding hands that maybe versus someone that was playing optimally you'd have to call, but you don't want to call because you don't think that he's bluffing at the optimal frequency. Basically, think about it like this. When you bet in poker on the river, and let's say you're betting in a perfect equilibrium, essentially, when your opponent calls, they lose to all your value bets, right? And when your opponent folds, they lose to all your bluffs. And the idea is that bet, when you do bet, just wins the size of the pot because your opponent can't do anything. If they fold, they lose. If they call, they lose. Now, by having bluffs in there, that means you get to win the pot more often. Let's say that if I only value bet, I could bet 30% of the time, but now I bluff, I can bet 40 or 45% of the time. Well, now I get to win more often. You can see what I'm saying. Rather than winning the pot 30% of the time, I'm winning the pot 40, 45% of the time. And there is no counter. There's no ability for your opponent to exploit you because your range is balanced. And that's the kind of idea that you're trying to put forward here. I want to bet at an optimal ratio where my opponent can't counter me, and thus I get to win the pot the most times possible.
That optimal ratio would lead you often to overbets, which probably took Daniel outside of his experience base a bit. Is that fair?
Overbets are a big part in Element Hold'em. And when you watch live poker, you don't see it because it is a bit more of an advanced concept. I think particularly on the turn and river, especially on the river, there's a lot of overbets at equilibrium. So let's just say in heads up, you open and your opponent calls and the flop is Jack 9-5 with a flush draw and they check call and the turn is a deuce and they check to you. Solvers like overbets here because your opponent isn't supposed to have a lot of good hands to check call this flop. If you have two pair, you're going to want to raise it quite often because there's all these draws. Your opponent's never hitting the deuce, right? And then you in position still have all of the value bets. You have all your two pairs. You have all your sets. You have all your over pairs. You have all your good top pairs. You have way more strong hands to the other guy. So in spots like that, the solver will very much recommend betting big. And as you get deeper, betting even bigger. You might bet 200% the size of the pot in that turn. That's not something you see in live poker that much because players aren't used to implementing it, or they don't know, or it's not normal, or whatever it would be. But that's quite common online. And then same board, let's say you bet 200% on the turn on that turn, or 150% the turn on that turn. Well, now if the river is, let's just say, a 7, so it's Jack 9, 5, deuce, 7. Well, now you have 10-8 and 8-6, but the other guy doesn't really have those hands. Maybe he occasionally calls turn with 10-8, but he never calls 8-6. So when I have 3 of a kind there, I could just jam 400% pot, no problem, all in. You don't have sets, you don't have straights. I can just jam, and I can do the same thing with my bluffs. If I have 8 high there, I have 8 deuce, whatever I have, or 8-3. Sorry, 8 deuce would be a pair. I can just jam because I know you don't have the nuts. So basically, in spots like that, the solver really likes using very big sizes. And what's cool about big sizes is it makes the price of your opponent so bad that you actually get to bluff more, right? If I jam that river, I'm only going to have a value bet, 60% of the time or so. And I'm going to have a lot of bluffs. I'll have 35, 40% bluffs. But they still can't just call me because I'm still mainly value betting, right? So it's basically in those spots, by using these really big sizes, you get to bluff more and then you get to win more because of it. And I don't think that's something that Daniel probably had much experience with before this challenge.
And big picture, that strategy is about winning more non-showdown pots.
It's about winning the pot the most often. And I know that's a weird semantics difference, but if my opponent decides just to call my all-ins all the time, then I'll win more in showdown, right? Because when I have the good hands, the straights, the sets, the strong two pairs, and he does call, I win every last dollar he has. So it's about winning the most money regardless of what my opponent does. And if you play someone that has too many weak hands or folds too often, the result will be more non-showdown winnings, right? But if you play somebody loose and spewy, the result will be more showdown winnings. It really depends on the style you're playing. And if you play against somebody that's very good and balanced, the result will be fairly equal in both regards because they'll be countering you in both ways.
On pots where Daniel is the aggressor, has the initiative, whether because he has a strong holding or because he's on a bluff line, you mentioned in Joey Ingram's podcast that you thought you might have had the mistake of calling too much. It seemed like you were saying that you thought you might have had the mistake of calling too much relative to equilibrium, which you took to be an especially serious mistake because Daniel might have erred towards under bluffing. Is that a reasonable summary of what you said in Joey's podcast? And is that, when you look back at it, like the one sort of leak that you had in the match? Or
that would be a fair assessment. It's tough so we all have our instincts. We all have our internal decision-making process that tells us what we think is right. And then we have to weigh that versus other things that we know to decide if that's what we want to do. But whenever you get in a spot in poker, you have your instincts for what's correct. As a poker player, you're just going to have them. For more conservative players, it tends to be to fold or to check. And for the spewier aggressive guys, it might be bet or make a loose call. And so you have to know where you are relative to what's correct, and then sort of try to pull yourself into line with what is optimal. For me, I'm someone that does not like to get bluffed. I don't know why. It's just the reality of the situation. I tend to overcall. I tend to search too far and wide for ways to continue to play my hands. And so in a lot of spots where my opponent bets or jams or whatever they're going to do, I tend to pick too many hands to continue with. Versus Daniel, I think that was a mistake in some spots. It was an especially bad mistake because I don't think he was picking out enough bluffs in some spots where those loose calls might have been particularly good against him. I think that they would not have been versus Daniel. So a big part of this match for me, especially down the stretch, was try to keep it in line. Try and call the hands that are supposed to call, but not wider than that. Because if I do that, he might be exploiting me by not bluffing.
Now, it would seem that an important part of such a long challenge, 25,000 hands, would be some sort of life coach, performance coach, mental coach. Did you have any of that on your team, or did you just trust your long experience in poker?
I didn't think that was necessary. I already had enough coaches and people working with me. I just didn't feel I need anyone else. What I did to prepare for this was I really tried to put things that could be automated or run by other people, tried to put those processes into place where I didn't have to worry about things. I made my investment strategy a little bit more simple and conservative, just for the sake of well-being, to be able to focus elsewhere. I tried to put myself basically in a position where I didn't have to worry about a lot of these other things. I could really put my best foot forward on the match itself, and then worry about everything else after the match concludes, which is nice in a way. You know, it's nice getting to fully dedicate to something and be able to be all in and consumed by it. And even though I'm not someone that loves to play poker, and I do think that the studying process is quite grueling, it was a nice just to get to be consumed by something in a fashion where I knew it was what I was doing today, and to have simple purpose can have a lot of reward, I think.
So take us through, okay, in your story, it gets off to kind of a smooth start in this challenge, and then sort of inciting incident. You have one bad session. That doesn't put things into question, but it shakes the ship a little bit. Maybe take us through that history.
There was a session in the challenge. It's the single greatest loss either player took in one session. And it was about 2/3, 3/4 of the way through, where I lost almost $400,000 in a session, which is a really big loss. I mean, a buy-in's $40K, and 10 buy-in sessions happen. In fact, I was surprised that we hadn't had any up until that point, but I think given how little variance there had been in the match thus far, and given the standard deviation for the match seemed to be a bit on the more conservative side, and then also given that I was currently up $1 million, it didn't really feel like it was going to happen, and then it did. And sometimes reality sets in, and it can give you that kick in the ass you need just to get things a little more into gear. But yeah, I went from up $1 million to up 600K with about 6,000 hands to go. And you look at that result and think, man, if we have another one of these kinds of sessions, I'm only going to be up 200K. And that's anyone's ball game down the stretch. 5 buy-ins, that's nothing in poker. Nothing. So it sort of, it awoke me a little bit to think, I need to make sure I keep studying. I need to make sure I keep preparing. Maybe I should make some changes in my strategy to lower variance a bit. And this is kind of what we talked about a bit earlier with side bets, where when you have side bets that are substantial, it could change what you need to do and how you need to play. And I started to look at this and think, okay, I'm up 15 buy-ins. Well, when I have a spot that's really close, it makes sense to take the lower variance option if I think it's going to increase the chance of me winning on the side. And so I started to have to debate these things, and ultimately I came to the conclusion to implement a limp strategy. Now, for those of you that aren't familiar with limping is very much frowned upon in the heads-up community, but it is actually a slightly stronger strategy than playing only raise. There are some hands that do benefit by limping, and it lets you have more options pre-flop to create value. But the thing is, it's very slight value. It doesn't change your interest win rate by more than 1 or 2%. So in my preparation for this challenge, for the sake of simplicity, I used a raise-only strategy to make sure that I was able to prepare for those spots more in depth, rather than add in this limping strategy that would be complicated to implement and take a lot of time and add complexity to my study. But at this point in the challenge, it made a lot of sense to add limping, because now if I limp, I'm going to decrease the pot size. I want to get to play these smaller pots. I'm not going to have as many big swings. I'm lowering my deviation. And so I thought it made sense to put it into play. So I did limp. And Daniel was not a happy camper about the limping. I'll tell you that right now, because the first session after I did the limping, he started to respond by stalling and just taking 20 seconds to open his button on both tables. Every decision, he would tank it down. And he was basically trying to respond by taking as much time as he could to get himself more time to study. So that session, it was one of the only sessions, the big loss was one of the only sessions that I felt bad after. When you play poker, you're used to sometimes taking big hits. It's going to happen. But I think what hurt about that one session was just the fact that I had it so locked up and now I didn't. I was still probably going to win, but now it wasn't 100%. And just stomaching that while also eating a 400K loss was a tough pill to swallow that night. I
can imagine. Well, when you didn't have to consider variance in your strategy at all, and then all of a sudden you do, that is tough. So for your ambitious no limit player out there that doesn't have the ability to pay Frap XD for training, which tools do you think are the best on the market currently? Obviously, you mentioned the lab at Upswing Poker, and then which other tools perhaps?
I think if you're going to take poker seriously nowadays, you're going to need to have a solver for sure. You can figure out what's out there. I'm not up to date on what the best solvers are for this challenge. I used PO in my analysis, but I've heard there are a lot of other good solvers that are options as well. I would recommend having training in some capacity, whether it's private coaching or a site like Upswing Poker, where you can learn about how to use these solvers and take away some concepts. The reality is it takes a long time using these tools to get good. And so having people that have done it before teach you some of the things that they have found can really it can be a very valuable shortcut on your term to improving. I'd also recommend using some software training tools like for example Lucid GTO is one that I use to practice with, or GTO Trainer. Basically training tools where you get to play against bots or you play against your sims or bots that basically say, okay, this was a mistake, this was correct, and then kind of getting to drill in this practice. I think it's really important for improving your game, to actually play hands. I think that's important as well. So I think all of these tools are very useful, and you can use them to improve your game. In the Joey podcast, you mentioned Primordial AA. Brian Pellegrino is also part of your team. What role did he play? Yeah, so Brian and Caleb and Ryan, basically his team of guys, they have some software that we used to create preflop ranges for essentially the sizes that Negreanu was using. It's not publicly available software, so I can't tell people where you can check it out. But they basically have some really strong AI using some techniques that are very new for poker solutions that were extremely strong and helped give me an edge to this challenge. So those are available in expensive, like one-to-one coaching? I don't even think those are available right now, to be honest with you, but I'm not totally sure. Okay. It was a nice connection to have, that's for sure. And Primordial has been around forever, right? Didn't he play like on Party Poker way back in the day? Yeah, he played a lot of set and goes back in the day. I think he was more of a heads of set and go player, but he's been in the suites for a long time. He doesn't play poker anymore, though, I don't think. People would find it hard to believe that you're retiring after this match, having invested in learning to such an extent. What's next in terms of Heads Up No Limit? For Heads Up No Limit, that I'm not sure. We've seen a real boost of action lately in Heads Up No Limit. I'm not sure if people are pumped up about the challenge or what, but I've seen all kinds of matches breaking out all over the internet. It's interesting to see that, because when I retired from Heads Up No Limit in 2014-15 or whatever the year was, it was kind of dead, and now it's more alive than it's ever been. I don't know if that's just a current spree of people enjoying the duking it out, maybe coronavirus, maybe it's the Bitcoin run-up. I have no idea what's prompting this seemingly random surge of people looking to duke it out on the internet. I really don't know, but seems like it's a pretty good time for the sport of Heads Up No Limit. What's the biggest thing going on right now? I saw the Landon Tice, young up-and-comer against Bill Perkins. Yeah. Laying 9 big blinds per 100, which is a lot. Yeah, so that match was a negotiation on Twitter between Bill Perkins and Landon. He's this young kid, kind of up-and-comer kid. where Landon has to lay 9 big blinds per 100. I think that one's really interesting. I considered some side bets. Ultimately, I've stayed out, at least so far. It's a funny one because I've played both of them, right? So I have a good insight into that match. Landon is pretty good, but he's not a heads up no limit pro. It's not like a top guy is taking on Bill Perkins. It's a guy who's a good player who will dedicate time and study, but isn't even a heads up pro, taking on a guy who is very much a recreational businessman. What does that look like? What can Landon overcome 9 big blinds per 100? I think if Bill Perkins doesn't take it seriously, I think Landon will win. But if Bill really studies and ups his baseline to be pretty solid, 9 big blinds is a lot. I mean, that's basically what I beat Negreanu for, and that's the break even point, right? And I'm a top heads up player. So if Bill Perkins can get to a similar level as Negreanu, I don't think Landon's going to get to a place where he would play as well as I did. He would be winning if he could get to that level, but I don't think Bill is very close to that level right now. So it's going to kind of come down to can Bill really, really lock in and focus and learn and study, when we all know Bill likes to get out there and sail the seas in his boat. I don't know. That's kind of the question you have to ask yourself. As far as other matches go, there's other stuff kind of percolating around. I've heard Limitless might play MJ in some kind of live challenge. And then just today, Daniel Negreanu challenged Phil Hellmuth to a heads-up match because Phil Hellmuth, actually this happened right before I came on the podcast. I was reading about this.
Wow.
Phil Hellmuth said he really didn't respect the way that Daniel played, or didn't like it, thought he played really poorly, basically. And then Negreanu threw down the challenge. So
wow, that could be amazing content.
Oh my God, that would be hilarious to watch, man. I couldn't even wait.
I mean, I love Phil, but Daniel would crush him at this point with all of the study that he's had.
I can't imagine Phil winning, but oh man, it would be so much fun to watch that. I'm rooting for it.
Was it heads up for roll style? Are they going to play for a lot of money?
I'm not sure if it's even going to happen right now. All I know is that Negreanu has issued the challenge to Phil Hellmuth, and we're going to see what he does from here.
Oh, that would be beautiful. I might have to throw in on that. Well, no, I might just have to get the Twitter storm going. Like, we need to see that definitely.
Actually, I have a question for you.
Okay.
I know you were going to play Phil Galfond at some point.
We're playing this summer.
Oh, you're playing this summer. Okay, yeah. Cool. Nice.
Yeah, we're playing. The format is around 1,000 hands because we're playing live.
Okay.
And we're playing 100, 200, and he's laying me 1.5 to 1, which is less than I think it's a little bit worse than the fair price. But what happened was it started out online, and then we couldn't logistically do it. And we decided to do it live, and that's what we agreed on, to do it live. So
that would be fun.
Yeah. It would be great if it were more than 1,000 hands, and maybe we will change it up because it's definitely this summer. Maybe we will change it up so that we kind of go back to the original idea, which was a live online combo, so that we're playing live with our computers in the same spot. You know what I mean? Like WSOP.com. We're both logged in, playing 2 tables of PLO, but we can see each other.
Battleship style.
Yeah, Battleship style. That'd be fun. But then we would have to go back to the old odds, which were like, I think 4 to 1.
How do you feel about this? Have you been studying? You've been up in your PLO game?
I have been studying. I need to study more, but I've been doing some study. And I talked with Sauce a bit about the right path I should follow, and plan to do some study before we get going.
I hope so, man. Lord knows how many hours that guy's spent studying. This is going to be his 4th challenge by that time, I think, right?
Yeah, but ours is a lot different because we did lay out the rules on text, and we reset each day. But like, the reality is that a good bit of the results will happen in pots that we play at the end of the days, because the stacks are getting deeper over the course of each day.
Yeah.
And a good bit of the result will be determined by what happens in key pots, like at the end of days. It's a little bit different than yours in the sense that we're not just playing 20,000 PLO the whole time. Like we're having stacks that are going to get deeper over the course of each day. And like, if either one of us loses a key pot, say at the end of day one, it will make a big difference in the result.
Well, there were plenty of 4 to 5 blind pots in my challenge where stacks got deep.
And I don't know. I haven't looked at the math of the thing. Like, what's a fair handicap? Me versus you, 1,000 hands online, no limit.
Online, no limit.
Like a fair. Well, I guess you have to have the stakes too, right? Because you get to win at whatever the stake level is. So let's say it's 50, 100, 1,000 hands. What would your intuition suggest the break even side bet would be? Let's just say it's on the side bet base is 20,000.
Problem here is if you get up much at all, you can just fold a lot of hands and be so likely to win. I mean, if you even stack me once, then I'm already in a not great spot. If you stack me twice, you can just do a lot of stuff pre-flop to make sure you win. You know, you can start folding cusp hands. You know what I'm saying? You can play very different at that point, and I can't do that much. You can start limping. You can do so much stuff. So I think in that scenario, I actually think in that scenario, you have to play so different from equilibrium that I think it greatly reduces the edge of the better player, because the better player can't just try to win the pot the most they can. The better player has to take into account the side bet situation. So it gets strange. I'm not sure what fair would be. That's a good question. I really don't know. I haven't thought about that format.
With Landon Tice versus Bill Perkins, if they were starting their match 15 minutes from now, what advice would you give Bill?
I'd say please don't do anything really spewy, because if you're gonna lay 9 big blinds, you just need to make sure you're not making huge errors.
Yeah, I think my advice would go the same direction, right? Like, just take the handicap that you're being given in terms of pre-flop hand quality and start there. Right? Like if you get to start with the knowledge that you have a 9 big blind per 100 head start, that corresponds to a massive difference in pre-flop hand quality, which goes a long way, right? Like if you can just throw out like the bottom range of hands that other players are forced to play just in trying to maintain equilibrium, that it's hugely valuable, right? Like just, I would say that he should make sure that he's not making mistakes in airing too loose, and take advantage of the gift of being able to play higher quality hands pre-flop.
Well, so there's 2 ways to look at this, and other people that I've talked to about it have made a similar point. My counter to that would be, anytime you make a mistake, you make a mistake. And so if you say, okay, well, you're going to play tighter pre-flop because you're being given big blinds. Okay, sure. You're saying, I'm going to make a mistake, but I'm being covered by the amount of big blinds I'm getting. But it's still a mistake, right? So it's still eating into your profit. It would still be better to play the correct hands pre-flop, because then you're just not making a mistake and you're closer to that win rate. But now you're going to have to make sure that you don't make mistakes with some of these hands post-flop. So I guess the question kind of becomes, is it more about minimizing the risk of large post-flop mistakes, or is it more about just trying to make sure you make as few mistakes as you can no matter where those happen? And I think that there's some interesting debate to be had on both sides of it. But my advice for Bill will be more specific. That man loves to get into some weird, funky spots and do some crazy shit. That's the stuff I would be very scared of if I was in Bill Perkins' corner, because I know Bill, and he will put himself into just some crazy, weird spots if he thinks that you're weak. And if he just tries to lean too heavy on that, it's going to get very, very, very expensive.
See, I would lean on the side of playing suboptimally tight, knowing that you're giving something up there, for exactly the reason that you say. Because if you play suboptimally tight, you're minimizing the risk of bad bad things happening later on. You're minimizing the cost of mistakes that you will make later on. And that has a lot of value. So for instance, like, let's just say his opening range is optimal, right? Let's say his open race is optimal. Now he's 3-bet by Landon and he's deciding what to do. He has the luxury of being a little bit too tight in that spot. And I would advise him to play a little bit too tight in that spot relative to optimal, because now playing too tight limits the impact of later mistakes, which are quite likely to happen. I mean, Landon is going to be good at playing those pots where he's 3-bet preflop, and Bill is going to be less experienced and might make mistakes where the pot is big. So just take the small cost of over folding or playing cautiously in a situation like that.
Yeah, that's fair, especially because a lot of hands are usually on that cusp. But my only counter to that would be, well, now Landon can exploit you by 3-betting a bluff heavy range, knowing you're folding too much, and just print value there, and then flat stronger, and then you're going to lose on that side as well. When he flats, you're up against a tighter range than you should be, and now you're not going to be able to win those pots as much. So really, anytime you deviate from equilibrium, you open exploits up that could beat you in both sides of the game tree. And I don't know if it's best to try and, I mean, nine big blinds is so much that, I mean, either of these strategies is fine as long as you're in the neighborhood of playing some reasonable post flop poker. You're going to be doing just fine. I almost wonder if at 9 big blinds, if there's some weird pre-flop shit you could do. Maybe you use a 20 big blind 3-bet size where, you know, you're more polar and your opponent can't really play post flop. Can he overcome 9 like that? You know what I'm saying? There could be really weird stuff that you could do pre-flop where there isn't even a counter. I that's possible at 9. 9's so much.
Yeah.
9 is so much. I won at 10 over my career. You know, we're talking about 9, and this guy's not even a heads up pro. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, it's an ambitious bet.
Yeah, Bill offered me 17. I said, Bill, unfortunately, I'm going to have to decline.
That's great. That's great.
Lay you 17 big blinds. He says, fine. How about 13? Bill, I'm not doing this, man. You can take it on.
I'm glad he has the hunger.
Yeah.
Well, this was a lot of fun.
It was. Thank you for having me on.
I think all of my audience will enjoy it. The poker people and the non-poker people.
Glad to hear it. Glad I could stop by.
All right. Let's chat soon.